Neil Duncan-Jordan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. What reassurance can the Minister give to hospices like Julia's House that serves my constituents who are concerned by the planned increase in national insurance contributions and the impact that that is going to have on the services that they provide?
Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. And as you all know, many hospices are independent charities. They will therefore be able to access the employment allowance, which we have doubled to £10,500 a year, as well as the other wider tax relief within the tax system for charities, such as business rates relief and gift aid. Of course, hospices quite often have statutory obligations with the NHS as well, and so I would suggest any hospices discuss their contract with their Integrated Care Board.
Shadow Minister Gareth Davis.
Good morning, Mr Speaker. Later today, the House will be voting on the government's £25 billion national insurance tax hike. To avoid any uncertainty when we vote, can the Minister confirm exactly which public sector organisations will be compensated?
Yeah, good Minister.
Well, if the Shadow Minister would like to know which public sector organisations are going to be compensated, he could look at what his government did with the Health and Social Care Levy, because the definition of public sector organisations is set out through the ONS. It's a regularly cited definition. We will reimburse departments and other public sector organisations.
Davis.
Speaker, there was so little information in that. I think the civil service will be very proud of him. The Minister won't say who will be spared by the Chancellor's tax raid, but we do know that working people will be made to pay. The OBR have said so, the IFS have said so, even the Resolution Foundation have said so, and working people know so. Why is it that Labour always leave office with higher unemployment than when they started?
Minister.
I don't think the Shadow Minister listened to my response to the previous question, Mr Speaker. I'll set out very clearly what the definition of the public sector is for the purposes of the national insurance contributions. If you look at what the OBR has said, yes, they recognise that we are asking businesses to contribute more and this will have impacts. But the OBR also says that the employment level by 2029 will rise from 33.1 million to 34.3 million, an increase in the employment level over this Parliament.
Democrat spokesperson Daisy Cooper.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Citizens' Advice in St Albans supports some of the most vulnerable people to access public services. They say that the national insurance contribution changes will, and I quote, hit hard because we employ mostly part-time staff, and the change to the threshold means we go from paying nothing to the full amount for each staff member. The increased rebate is intended to offset the national insurance contribution for small organisations, but does not for us because so many of our staff are part-time. Will the Chancellor and Ministers look again at the impact of the national insurance contribution changes on part-time workers?
Minister.
Mr Speaker, we recognise that the decision we've taken is a tough decision to increase the rate and to broaden the base through the changes to the secondary threshold. I welcome the work that the organisation the Honourable Lady mentioned does in her constituency, but I would also say that perhaps the need for advice might be less if public services were stronger. And one of the reasons why we are taking these difficult decisions about taxation, welfare and spending is precisely to make sure that public services can provide the service that people need.
Sammy Wilson.
Mr Speaker, the heavy burden of business rates and also the national insurance contributions which the government is going to impose on small businesses is taxing businesses to death. Does he not recognise that in doing so he is going to cause unemployment, higher inflation, lower growth, and we're heading for higher taxes in future because of this downward economic spiral?
Minister.
Well, as the honourable gentleman will see in the National Insurance Contributions Bill this afternoon, we have specifically doubled the employment allowance, which will help those small businesses to employ up to 4 people earning national living wage without paying a penny of national insurance. That is dedicated support to help those small businesses in the context of what I admit is a tough decision. But perhaps if he has a chance to contribute to the debate later, he might say whether or not he supports the extra public services funding which comes from these difficult decisions.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Last week, the Chancellor told the CBI conference that she wouldn't, quote, come back with more borrowing or more taxes. Last Wednesday, the Prime Minister hung her out to dry and refused to repeat those words. So will she repeat them today and rule out any more borrowing or any more taxes, yes or no?
Chancellor.
The budget in October, we had to fill the £22 billion black hole left by the previous government. We'll never have to repeat a budget like that because we won't ever have to clear up the mess of the previous government ever again.
Speaker, for living standards, for driving income equality, for children's life chances, the single most important factor is having a job. Why is she disregarding this fundamental truth with policies and tax that will actively harm employment, and particularly youth employment?
Minister.
Mr Speaker, we know that if you look at the OBR forecasts of what will happen over the course of this Parliament, the employment level will increase from 33.1 million to 34.3 million. And he talks about youth unemployment. I suggest he reads our Get Britain Working White Paper, which sets out in detail what we would do to help get young people and people suffering from ill health back into work.
Rupert Lowe.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Rather depressing listening this morning. I can't help this repetition of 22 billion black hole. We're dealing with very serious matters like people's employment. Ultimately, I hear the Chancellor talking about a central planning agenda. It's the public services that are the problem. They're wasting money. Please, can we please seriously consider this? Will she accept if the economy turns down next year, she's made a mess of it, which surely it will?
Chancellor.
The reason we are raising the £22 billion is because that is the black hole inheritance that this government are now having to address. We've published a line-by-line account of that £22 billion that the previous government left. We are now growing the economy through our National Wealth Fund, our planning reform, our pensions reform, as well as reforming our public services so that we can deliver for the people we came in here to represent.
Give your name, sorry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Businesses like Mr Miles in Taunton High Street are being hit hard by the changes in taxes for hospitality businesses, the increase in wage bill but also national insurance contributions and the massive increase in business rates, such that they are now considering reducing their opening hours and making our high street less vibrant than it really should be. Will one of the challenges is the 50,000 rateable value limit for the discount. Many premises on high streets have a rateable value of more than 50,000. Would the Chancellor consider reviewing the limits placed on the discount for business rates for small businesses?
Minister.
Well, as the honourable gentleman will know, we've set out our plans for reforming business rates to make sure that retail, hospitality and leisure properties on the high street with rateable values below £500,000 will benefit from a permanent tax cut from this government. The importance of that tax cut being permanent is it gives businesses the stability they need to invest and grow, and I look forward to his support for our reforms when we vote on them in due course.
Stewart.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can the Minister confirm that of the £26.4 billion tax rise through the NIC employers increase, that £19 billion of that will come directly out of people's pay packets? And secondly, could he confirm that the net amount that the Treasury will actually get after behavioural change and public sector compensation of that £26.4 billion is just £11 billion?
Minister.
The honourable gentleman, Mr Speaker, seems to have forgotten the cost that working people paid as a consequence of his party's actions in government. With inflation on house prices racing to 11%, with the cost of living, with energy bills, with a loss of grip on public spending, people suffered a direct cost in their disposable income because of the actions of the Conservative Party. This Labour government has wiped the slate clean, is getting a grip of public spending and fixing the foundations and delivering for working people.
Bradley Thomas.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Will the Chancellor admit, as she has done already in the media, that wages will be lower because of her jobs tax?
This government's commitment to economic growth will improve living standards for people right across the country. And quite frankly, I refer the honourable member to my previous question and suggest that his party might want to apologise before trying to lecture this government on the change we are delivering.